Good evening. Welcome to tonight's On the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers. Tonight's show is 2 hours long and live, so if you have any questions for my guests during the show, text them to 87778 with the word EDGE, a space, and then your name, location and your message, and we'll try to pick up any that really hit the mark. They're all charged at a standard rate, so why not get ready to text? My show tonight is possibly one of the most contentious shows we have ever made. If my guest is correct, our nation no longer exists as a sovereign state. Our leaders, past and present, including Her Majesty the Queen, have committed treason. Parliament will shortly be abolished, and we will find ourselves as slaves to a Soviet-style European Politburo. My guest is a computer expert who has worked all over the world, including in New York for major companies such as JP Morgan Chase Bank, and who stood for Parliament in 2005 as a UKIP candidate, and also stood for that party's leadership. He flies planes, races yachts, and is one of the leading anti-European Union campaigners. His website, www.eutruth.org.uk, receives over 6,000 visitors a month. And he has driven here tonight from somewhere in continental Europe. Yes, really. He is David Noakes. What a show we've got tonight. David, welcome.
Thanks, Theo. Good to meet you.
Yes, good to meet you. Now, you've been an activist, an anti-EU activist for a while. How did you become aware that maybe there was another side to this European Union that perhaps we weren't being told?
Well, it was 1997, and I was actually in the USA working at the time. And it became obvious to me that whatever we voted for in England, we didn't get. And the same agenda just
Are you talking
going.
about just national elections?
Yes.
For Parliament?
Yes, yes. The will of the people was never being implemented. It didn't matter on what subject. The government was completely ignoring the people. And I started doing some research, and I started reading EU treaties, and I found out why.
Okay, and what did you discover then?
Very simply, that the European Union has the constitution of a dictatorship, the laws of a police state, and 120,000 regulations, which, when fully enforced, will drive us into abject poverty, which is their intention.
Well, okay, that's a bit simplistic, isn't it? I mean, why would they have that intention, assuming that's true?
There are huge benefits to people who are running dictatorships. So, you know, you look at the Soviet dictatorship.
Stalin or...
Yes, they live a life of incredible power and luxury. And right the way through history, before Roman times, from the Tower of Babel, people have been trying to create dictatorships where they have a superior standard of living, a massively superior standard of living, and the rest of the world are their serfs. That's their reign.
People would argue, for instance, that Barack Obama has a very high standard of living, and they would also argue, and I'm not supporting this necessarily, but they would also argue that America's political system does not involve a dictatorship.
There's an agenda that's been going for a very long time. This is the third attempt to build a dictatorship in Europe. The Kaiser had a go, the Führer had a go, and this is the third attempt, and this is the one that looks like it's going to be successful.
Well, is there a Kaiser? Is there a Führer? Who is that? I mean, Angela Merkel, are you saying that she's the Führer?
There is a pyramid of power, and at the top of the pyramid of powers, as you will probably know, there are the Illuminati, incredibly rich families, and at the top of those are incredibly rich banking families. The Federal Reserve in the USA is owned by 13 banking families. Underneath them, you have the bilderbergers, and the job of the bilderbergers is to build the EU dictatorship. There are only 140 of them. They are all either stunningly wealthy or stunningly powerful.
Ex-presidents and
well, you
current presidents and prime ministers.
Yes, you cannot be a prime minister of England unless you are a bilderberger.
So Cameron is a bilderberger, is he?
He had to become one, yes. About a year before he became leader of the Conservative Party, he couldn't have been.
But they've had so many leaders, haven't they, the Conservative Party, in recent years.
Yes.
Are they all bilderbergers? All those bald men whose names escaped me for a moment?
If they look like they might make it to being Prime Minister, absolutely. Yes, no question. So, at the time of Ted Heath, there are always 8 bilderbergers at the top of the leadership of the Conservative Party, and have been since Ted Heath's time, because that is enough voting power to control the Central Committee. So the Conservative Party does not represent Conservatives or Conservative voters, it represents the bilderbergers who control it. So in Ted Heath's day, the bilderbergers were obviously Ted Heath himself, Sir Alec Douglas Home, Geoffrey Rippon, Sir Keith Joseph, family names, Whitelaw, you know,
Willie Whitelaw.
Willie Whitelaw, yeah. Who are they today? Francis Maude, Ken Clarke. One of those two is the real leader of the Conservative Party, and I don't know which one. We'll come back to that later.
Okay.
And then underneath the bilderbergers, you have the Freemasons and Common Purpose, who are the foot soldiers of the European Union in England. Most of the 350,000 Freemasons have no idea what secret they are protecting. They go through all these oaths, but they don't know what the secret and the agenda is at the centre. It's only a very small
They
number.
do have all these blood oaths where they say if they ever reveal anything, they will rip out their hearts and have their guts removed and thrown over their shoulder or something,
That's
don't they?
right, yeah.
But you're saying that they don't. So a lot of good people might be Freemasons and might have perfectly good intent. Is this what you're saying?
Absolutely right, and they are all duped by the central core, who have a very evil agenda indeed.
And surely this is also true of Common Purpose. I mean, I know people in Common Purpose.
Yes.
And I don't think that they're necessarily evil. I mean, I think it's possible that most people have a propensity to evil given the right circumstances, but I don't think they're evil now, necessarily, are they? So they could just be innocent.
Absolutely. So, you know, just as over 90% of the 350,000 Freemasons are only there to disguise the central core of the Freemasonry agenda, half of Common Purpose's 40,000 so-called graduates never make it to the inner sanctum, never get to do anything except make Common Purpose look like a lovely organisation, and it is not. The aim of Common Purpose is to take control of local government. So the bilderbergers are taking control of national government, and Common Purpose is taking control of local government and government departments. It controls the output of the BBC, it screens out all anti-EU news from the BBC, which is why people like me cannot get on to the BBC.
Well, on your website you say that you spend time at the BBC.
Yes.
So does that mean you have been on the BBC?
Yes, don't really want to go into this, but yes, I did actually manage to get myself a job on the inside of the BBC, quite right, yes.
Okay, well, you put it on your website. Okay, I should say that we have done a programme about Common Purpose on this programme with Brian Gerrish, who I know that you worked with some time ago.
Yeah.
So let me start reading out a couple of texts. I've got one here from Mark in Leeds who says, a dictatorship will never happen. The game is finally up for the, I can't read out that words, I'm afraid, Mark, the people of the New World Order. Joe in Liverpool says, do you think that John Smith, who was a good man, was murdered because he wouldn't be a bilderberger? Do you know who that is, John Smith?
Yeah, he was briefly leader of the Labour Party.
Oh, that John Smith, of course.
Yes.
Well, he's deceased, isn't he?
Yes, and Robin Cook